Hello, good afternoon, everyone. We will just wait 1 minute to start with the official webinar. But thank you already for joining the session. Everyone is now joining the room, so we'll wait 1 minute and then we will start with the official webinar. And thank you already in advance for joining. Okay, it is 2:01, so it's the starting point for our first official webinar of Circles of Life. Thank you all for joining. It's great that we see that so many people are already joining the session. We had more than 70 registers, but now we already see 30 people in the room. So thank you all for being here. Very short, my name is Rosanne van Houwelingen. I work for the Dutch Trade Association for shipyards, maritime suppliers, and the offshore industry. And I'm also a partner of Circles of Life. But all the speakers here today are partners of Circles of Life. They are all from different organizations with different backgrounds, NGOs, suppliers, etc. But today we all are one front for Circles of Life. And we are looking forward to tell and also show you how we as Circles of Life contribute to enhancing circularity and sustainability in the maritime sector, and then specifically for the maritime industry. So we're looking forward also where we are now at this stage and what our goals are. At the end of the session, at the end of the informative webinar itself, we will also show you and share with you how you as a stakeholder can be more involved. But before we go into more detail and into more information in depth of the project, we first would like to know who is in the room with us today. So we have prepared a poll question so that we can also see where you are from, for what kind of organization you are working for. So I would like to start the first poll question, and that is, where are you from? So I hope there's now a picture popping up in your screen where you can share where you're from. You can share your country, even your city if you would like to, and we can see how the different counties are represented. Okay, I see Germany, Netherlands, Finland, Helsinki, even Canada. So outside Europe is also joining this session. I see also Italy, that's also very good. Also Norway has joined the session. I've seen more people from Finland, Bordeaux. And it's also good to see that we already have 42 answers. If you would like to see your answers yourself, you can also check at the top of this session. You can click the poll, and then you can also see the results of the poll questions. But it's good that we are so well represented from Europe, but that we also have people joining from the other continents. I even saw in the chat that somebody is joining from Australia. Okay, thank you for filling in. Then I would like to go to the next question. And the next question is, I will just start it now. And the next question is, what type of organization do you work for? And you can think about a design office, or for example, a shipyard itself. You're a contractor, you work for research, but we already see some answers coming in. We even see also NGOs that are joining the session, also associations, of course. But also nice to see that we have the offshore side. I see even the cruise sector has joined the session. somebody from software development, and I also see an expert who has joined the session. I'm curious about what the expertise is. More contractors also joining, also someone who is in vessels and equipment itself. Okay, thank you all also for filling in the question. It gives a good overview of what type of companies we have now in the room. And we see a wide diversity from shipyards to maritime suppliers, but also NGOs, associations. So good, and thank you also for taking the time to join. Then I would like to start the last poll question. And it's mainly that we're also curious, why are you joining this informative webinar? What is your interest and what is your focus? This is also the last poll question. So now you see the last poll question also in your screen. I'm already receiving some answers about learning, sustainability, the material passport itself, environmental footprint. Well, then you're joining the right webinar, fortunately. The work of Circles of Life itself, I think also where we are standing, we will also share that with you. Also carbon footprint. One of our goals is also how can we reduce the environmental footprint of shipyards? And also the LCAs. Well, you will also hear a bit more later on. And the competitive edge. Jorinus will also tell a little bit more about that. So that's also good to hear. Circularity for the yard itself. Oh, and the building phase and also the maintenance phase of the ship's life cycle. Okay, thank you for sharing. I will now also close this poll. Thank you for filling it in. So we have also an idea why you have joined this session in this room. So it's good to see that we have so many different nationalities, but also different backgrounds in the room. So I think we can kick off. So I will start sharing my screen. And I would like to give the floor to Jorinus Kales. He's our project coordinator, and he will introduce to you shortly Circles of Life.
Yes, welcome again, and thank you, Rosanna. The purpose of Circles of Life, the project, is to create a method for evaluating sustainability. And I think based on the stakeholders that are in the webinar now, you will recognize the need to understand what you're doing, what is sustainability, etc., and how do you report on it, but primarily, what are we talking about? So that is this webinar about somewhat. And if you go to the next slide, Rosanna.
Yes.
And you also see that this is about sustainability and circularity, but primarily for the shipbuilding sector and also in collaboration with the industry. You see that there's 16, if I count correctly, 15 partners involved from across the industry. So that's suppliers, but it's also universities, suppliers, knowledge institutes, research companies, but also yards predominantly. And with this team, we work on the project that is very simplified, explained on the next slide. That is classical sustainability things on shipyards really focus on the yard itself, for which you can define nice labeling, etc. But what is more important is also that it's the whole value chain that is involved. So from the supply chain, they bring stuff to the yard. On the yard, something happens to it, and then in the end, it is on the ship. And what we focus on in the project is to develop a labeling strategy or a passport for the shipyards and also for the ships that will support the complete life cycle of the ship. And it's focusing on the non-operational impact. So everything that, well, is not essentially the consumables that are consumed when the ship is sailing, but primarily what happens to the ship when it's on a yard, whether that's a new build, repair and maintenance, but also the recycling of ships. And then a main aspect that's also deliverable, that's indeed the education part about this. The project will not only deliver a proposal for a standard or a way to work with it, but it also will guide you through the process of how to do it and how to apply the results of Circles of Life. And more about that also later in this webinar. And then for my last slide, what happens if we're done with the project? Fairly simple, and this is actually wordier than that I had intended to explain it to you, but it's up to you then that you can identify where the environment impact hotspots are and assess them and improve them. And also for decision making, so support you in making objective decisions on circular alternatives, both for ship design, but also on how you execute the operation. And by that, and since most of those environmental impact hotspots are also inefficiencies, by addressing those inefficiencies and waste, you could also potentially become more competitive and also more compliant with the European rules and upcoming regulation. And then the call to action is, we need your input. But as you can see from the picture that I put next to it, it's a nice AI artwork. But AI won't solve this for us, so we need your input also to make sure that we head in the right direction. That was my contribution to this webinar, and I hope you enjoyed the other contributions. And then Rosanne will take the floor again.
Okay, thank you, Jorinus, also for shortly introducing our Circles of Life project. As you can see, we have 15 partners. It's very extended, so it's very nice that you could keep it this short, Jorinus. Thank you for this. So a bit of the setup of the webinar itself. First, we would like to get to know you, of course, so that's why we also started the poll, who is here in the room. Now I will also share with you the setup of the webinar, what will we discuss, what will we share. Then we go into the informative side with different speakers who will share their expertise and also their insights for Circles of Life. Then we have a short break of 5 minutes, so you can grab a cup of coffee at 3 o'clock. But you can also think about questions for the Q&A session that will come up. And then we will end also with a roundup. And I would like to inform you also, with this webinar, it's also an automatic recording that is started. So also please be aware that this session is being recorded in that sense. Okay, so thank you. If we think about the informative side of the webinar, we have it divided in 3 blocks. So the first block is about setting the scene. So setting the scene about circularity and sustainability in the maritime sector, and then also specifically to the maritime industry. So what are the concepts, circularity and sustainability in this sector? Once we have set the scene, we are going to explain and elaborate on how Circles of Life contribute to enhancing circularity, but also sustainability itself. So what kind of results are we developing, or what kind of solutions to contribute to this sustainability and circularity in our sector? Once we have shared our contributions and what we are working on and what our developments are, then we get to the third block. And the third block is the following step. How are we going to translate our results into practice? So how are we going to make the translation from the theory towards the industry itself? If you think about the first block, setting the scene on circularity and sustainability, we have 2 amazing speakers in the room. That's Benedetta and Antedea. Antedea is of Green Marine Europe, and Benedetta is of the NGO Shipbreaking Platform. So it's also really good to see that we have NGOs within Circles of Life, and they will also share their contributions on these topics. Then the second block, we have Martin Verboom here in the room. He works for Dame Shipyard, and he will share and elaborate on how we are developing our contributions and the results within Circles of Life, which help to achieve our goal to make the maritime industry more circular and sustainable. Then our last speaker, that's Matthias Krause. He works for CMT, and he will share also from his vision how he's going to translate with our partners within Circles of Life the results into practice with case studies and a best practice guide. So this is the setup for you today. The setup further is that during the presentations, you have the opportunity to ask questions. You see in the top line above, you can choose for the chat function, but you can also choose for the Q&A function. We would like to ask you to use the Q&A function to put in your question in there. So if you click on the Q&A, I will choose also. If you click on the Q&A itself, you already see the first message. And that's a message from my side. And you can give a thumbs up to the message itself, you can also do it. But if you do not like the message, of course, you do not need to give a thumbs up. But then we also know whether it's working, because we would like to ask you, if somebody has shared a question and you think that's a very interesting question, also from my point of view, give a thumbs up, because during the Q&A session, we will answer the questions with the most likes. So if you think this is a very interesting question, please give a thumbs up. I already see some people giving a thumbs up to the first message. So I think you can all find this Q&A box. So it helps us also to gather the questions and to give answer to most of them. If there are other things happening, the sound is off or anything else, you can put in the chat. So any other remarks, but for the questions, please use the Q&A box. If everything is clear up until this point, I will stop sharing my screen. And I would like to give the floor to Benedetta and Antonia, who are going to set the scene on circularity and sustainability in the maritime sector.
Yes, thank you very much for the word, Rosanne. Now I shared my slides, so I hope everybody can see them. Yeah, welcome to our webinar. Basically, in this first part, I will take the word explaining some concept on circularity, sustainability that are at the core of Circle of Life, and then I will leave the word to Antidia from Green Marine, who will anchor this concept in the maritime world with Green Marine Europe. So I think you're already, maybe most of you, very well aware of what is circularity, sustainability. In Circle of Life, we are really trying to contribute to a circular and sustainable maritime sector, not only in theory, but also in practice, with action and being able also to be accountable on those actions. You know already that these words are pretty much used everywhere. they really seem buzzwords nowadays, but we would really like to have them as our foundation for the project to build up, to guide our transition. I know that maybe some of you are already trying to implement this concept in your work, and also I would like to ask you to engage with us to provide your feedback, your perspective on how to integrate this concept with Circle of Life, but also to give us your example. So I would like to start with introducing the foundational principles of circular economy by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. Maybe some of you already know them, or maybe you heard as well other regenerative economy principles, such as the donut economy. I would like to start by using the Ellen MacArthur Foundation concept, as it's a very inclusive framework. It's already widespread in the private and public sector, and it's really holistic in connecting environmental goals with the systemic change. So there are four main principles. We start with the first one at the level of importance, which is preserving the natural capital. We know that the Earth has finite stocks of clean air, water, and soil. We need to protect them and to preserve them. The second principle is design for waste prevention, which is basically avoid to create waste in the first place. Then we have elimination of negative externalities. So we're still depending on a linear economy where we are externalizing the hidden social environmental cost. We are still, in certain cases, exporting pollution and dangerous jobs to communities in the global south, and this needs to change. There cannot be circular economy if we are still exporting these kind of externalities of our economy. And then at the fourth step, we have foster cycling and recycling. I highlighted the word recycling in red color to show you that this is coming only after the first three principles are satisfied. So there is not a real circularity if the first three principles are not put into action. And yes, circularity by only recycling is kind of just prettier version of what we have right now. Then we see, yes, I like GIF a lot. I hope you like them, you find them instructive as well. I put here a picture of the waste hierarchy, which is the basis of the European legislation on waste management. As you can see, there are 5 stages: prevention, preparing for reuse, recycling, recovering, and disposal. Unfortunately, at the moment, we are still focusing a lot on the bottom half of this hierarchy, which is recycling, recovering, and disposal. We are not talking a lot about prevention and preparing for reuse, which deserve more attention. Data from the European Commission of end of 2024 are still saying that the European economy is still pretty much linear. Only the 12% of material that we use in the EU are coming from recycled materials, which means that we still have a lot to do. And I would like to say it also, yes, from a positive sense, to encourage all of you to collaborate with us on these aspects. But luckily, we don't start from scratch. In the Circle of Life project, we have a very good roadmap, a very good framework that is provided at EU level by the Green Deal. So the Green Deal is a big cross-industry roadmap to climate neutrality. So Europe is on a pathway to become the first climate neutral continent by 2050. It's a very ambitious plan. It aims to decouple growth from resource use, so from extractivism. It covers all kind of industries, or is not sector specific, and it really push for innovation on circularity, the creation of green jobs, which is at the core of the European Green Deal as well. It is based on several key pillars. So for Circle of Life, we are looking, let's say, specifically at 2, which are the Circular Economy Action Plan. Is actually a, yes, this kind of framework that is encouraging us, is providing the tools to design, to build, and to operate ships to maximize resources and to minimize waste, to really have a transformational, like system transformation. And then the second ingredient, which I would like to stress in particular for its importance, is corporate transparency, or transparency in general. So we have several key legislation at European level for corporate transparency, and this is the implementation part of the green transition, right? Without monitoring data, without monitoring, yes, having clear data, we cannot have a clear idea of how much we are progressing and in which direction. Without transparency, greenwashing is thriving, something that we don't want. There are several companies that are already investing a lot on being more transparent, disclosing, investing in their new skills and in new technologies. And it's important that transparency is out there, is really locking us, making us more informed in order to have better decision and helping us to internalize the real cost. So what I want to highlight with this presentation is that there's no real circularity without internalization of social and environmental cost. So a little bit my question maybe, it's what is the point of building up a circular economy that is built on unsafe or unpaid labor, or on the just shifting the pollution to communities in the global south? I think if we get it right, actually, true circularities, ethical circularities cannot only bring environmental benefit, monetary benefit, because values of materials are retained, but also it can bring social and environmental justice. And now I will let the word to Antigone. If you, yes. you can just tell me when to switch slides and I will do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Benedetta. Thank you for this clarification. So Green Marine Europe is a project that have been incubated by Surfrider Foundation that you have seen in the partners at the beginning. And Green Marine Europe is an environmental certification with transparency. So we are connected with CSRD, and we are working with the global environmental industry, maritime industry, sorry. And the program has a broad scope with several indicators that encompass biodiversity, but also social aspects with the community relation, and water and soil quality, but also air emission when we meant by decarbon. If you can switch, please. Mm-hmm. So here is the community of Green Marine in Europe, and I have the chance to have my colleague in North America with us today. This has been launched like 5 years ago. We already have ship owners from the beginning, but shipyards just for 1 year. And we already have ship owners from 4 countries, and this is growing up. So don't hesitate to ask for more information if you want to become a certified member. And I will explain why. Can you shift, please? Why? Because we have indicators that are relevant to measure and to identify the environmental impact and how to progress. Most of the time, companies come to us to see what could be the roadmap on the efforts they have to do on all those indicators. As you can see, of course, there are greenhouse gases, but also circularity, the gesture of ship recycling, and community impacts and community relations. So it's not just about reducing the impact, it's also how we work with the riverines, how we work with the stakeholders, and how we are connected with them, getting some feedbacks. And of course, in this year, with a modification on the Marine Strategy Framework Directive, there is many things on pollution, like spill prevention and aquatic invasive species. So all those indicators are built also on the European legislation, really connected to and facilitating a continued progress in the reduction on environmental footprint for all this. That's why we work in CirclesOfLife. We are trying to feed all the indicators that Martin will be talking about, so the CPI, but also facilitating some insights for the future of CirclesOfLife. You can switch to the next one. And here is the connection between our indicators and ESG. The fact that all those indicators are fitting with ESG demands and have the possibility to help each company that is involved in this program to have a few things already done to fill the CSRD program. So of course, Green Marine is like something really little in the global CSRD, but for this activity in specific, it will be helpful to measure, to see the progress from year to another, and to facilitate information also to the other stakeholders. Because it's not just about filling the gap with the legislation, but it's also about, you've seen those little labeling. It's about connecting with the stakeholders for the final customer, for the consumers, for the passenger. If you build a cruise ship, it helps you to communicate to the other stakeholders. So this is where we are, 1 year and a half after beginning, and this is where we want to go. And I will pass the mic to Martin for the second block.
Well, thank you, Benedetta, and also Antodia for this, for setting the scene for sustainability and circularity. It's great that we also have the NGO shipbreaking platform within our consortia, because they have, Benedetta, so many insights on the current state of circularity, but also ship recycling. And it's also that Antodia, as the director from Green Marine Europe, to have in our consortia. It's great that we have an organization who has as a mission to assess and monitor circularity and sustainability for the maritime industry. So thank you for sharing. Then I would like to give the floor to Martin. Martin will elaborate more on our contributions and results that we are developing within Circles of Life.
Thank you. Let me quickly share my screen. Share the right screen. Yes. No. Please let me know if you can see the screen now, Rosanna. Okay,
yes,
great.
we can see it. Yes.
Thank you very much. So, good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for the introduction. My name is Martin Verboom, and I'm going to talk about the results we are developing within Circles of Life. Quickly move this screen to another screen so I can see my slides. The results we develop within will support reducing the environmental footprint of shipyards and enhance circularity in the maritime value chain. But before we start off, sustainability is sometimes a little bit of an abbreviation bingo. So just to clarify, I will shortly explain the three main subjects: SAPI, SCMP, and SLP. So first, SAPI, the Shipyard Environmental Performance Index, which has a focus on shipyard level. The SCMP is the Ship Circular Materials Passport and focuses on the materials and components used to build a ship. And last but not least, the SLP, the Ship Lifecycle Passport, which focuses on the ship as a product. And there is a connection between these three, which I will elaborate on later. So first, we focus on the Shipyard Environmental Performance Index. And like I mentioned, it's called SAPI. On the question how to measure, assess, report, and improve the environmental footprint of shipbuilding processes, the answer for us is SAPI. SAPI focuses on shipyard processes, from the materials that arrive at the yard, the inflow, to how it gets transformed and integrated into a ship, up to how it leaves the yard, either as a ship or as another outflow stream. And that is hopefully done while retaining circular value, like Benedetta elaborated on. And for all these processes, SAPI can help identify the hotspots on the various ESG topics. And even make this assessment comparable by applying a scoring methodology. And it's good to note that SAPI focuses on the non-operational life cycle of a vessel and applies for all yard types, from new build to repair and conversion, all the way to end of life. So we have applied the following strategy to develop the SAPI concept. First, what to measure based on current and future legislation, like CSRD, like mentioned, Circular Economy Action Plan. Where to measure based on a shipyard process model. And how to measure and how to assess, improve, compare, and report. But SAPI is not just about, it's not about just start measuring everything and include that in an assessment. It's the other way around. SAPI helps you identify the hotspots in your operation, where it can most effectively be improved. And this can be done by improving the measuring detail level or by assessing where to invest in new technology to lower your environmental impact. And SAPI also supports this functionality. And by aligning the SAPI methodology to the current and upcoming rules and legislation, we make sure that the outcome of the SAPI can be reused as input to the reporting requirements and improvement planning. So on the question how to represent the performance of a yard, of a shipyard, we have come up with a scoring methodology, which consists of two axes. And this can be seen on the left side of the screen. There's one horizontal axis, which shows the yard performance on the ESG topics compared to a benchmark for each of the specific topics. And there is a vertical axis, which shows the maturity level of the shipyard, where at the lowest maturity level, the hotspots are calculated on main process level, up to the highest maturity, where hotspots are measured on the most detailed activity level of the process. And that assessment is then supported by a full digital shipyard model with real-time measurements at the highest maturity level. So together with the SAPI concept, CirclesOfLife has developed a generic shipyard model. Here it's really basically represented. The generic shipyard process model, which covers an end-to-end, the full lifecycle scope of shipyards, like I mentioned before, helps identifying the ESG hotspots and supports improvement modeling and planning. So here you can see the generic digital shipyard model just represented by a few blocks, but in the higher maturity levels, where the hotspot assessment is more detailed and information becomes more specific by going from calculated at main level to measured process activities, the generic shipyard model can then be transformed from a generic to a specific digital shipyard model for your yard. And this enables assessment and improvement planning, which, not by coincidence, aligns with standards like ISO 50001 on energy management. So then the question, what have we done so far? We have developed the concept and methodology behind SAPI on how to identify the hotspots and improve environmental impact and circularity for shipyards, including the scoring methodology and maturity levels approach. And based on that output, we are currently developing a SAPI software tool. And of course, we're going to validate the concept and software tool in case studies at the actual yard within the consortium and provide user support combined with a best practice guide. But this will be further discussed by Matthias. So that was it for now on SAPI. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out in the Q&A session. Next up, I will introduce the Ship Lifecycle Passport and the Ship Circular Materials Passport, which focus on material inflow on a product-based perspective. So where the SAPI focuses on assessing and improving circularity and environmental impact on a shipyard level, the Ship Circular Materials Passport and the Ship Lifecycle Passport are the answer to the question how to improve circularity and lower environmental impact on materials, components, and ship level. These two passports support assessment and hotspot analysis of environmental impact, fulfilling the following objectives. The first one, the key element for more sustainable and circular products, is information. The passport bridges these information gaps over the life cycle of ships, its components and materials, by supplying valuable information on environmental footprint and circularity. This also supports the second objective. The passports enable objective decision-making. For example, in the design phase of a ship, it supplies information on what component has the lowest environmental footprint and the highest circularity, so that the designer can select the most optimal component. Or in the ship repair phase, you can find information on the paint used on the ship, or how to disassemble the ship at the end of life, and where to source the reusable parts, so we can retain that value. And that's also the link to the next objective. The passport enables circular value retention by supplying the key information on the history of parts and materials, so that the most optimal circularity strategy can be selected from the frameworks. And finally, it also enhances the circularity of materials and components during the ship's life cycle, so that at the end of life, the parts and materials can be geographically located, detached without damaging, and reused, refurbished, or remanufactured, rather than just recycled, which, like we heard before, was hopefully the last resort. And this can be done because you have updated, upgraded, and document your equipment and materials properly. And this will also give you a higher possible value for your product at the end of life. And we made sure that for the passports are compliant with all the relevant regulations, like adopting ISO 59000 on circularity, the EU Eco-Design for Sustainable Product Regulations, including regulation on digital product passport, and more focused on maritime with regulations like the EU Ship Recycling Regulation. So for my final slide, I will explain the link between ship circular materials passport, the shipyard environmental performance index, and the ship lifecycle passport. The SCMP provides the information on materials and components coming from the suppliers. If you add the information on what happens to these materials and components in the shipyards by integrated into a ship, you get the ship lifecycle passport. So in the words like Jorinus described it before, you have the stuff for the ship, plus what happens to this stuff in the shipyard, documented and combined in the ship lifecycle passport. A document of all the impacts and information on the materials and components and processes that have formed the vessel. And that is maintained and upgraded over the life cycle of the ship to contribute to enhancing circularity and lowering product environmental footprint. And this is the link between these three I mentioned at the beginning of my part of the webinar. So that is it so far for my contribution to the webinar. I would like to thank you for your attention. And if you have any questions, please ask them in the Q&A. We will be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Martin, for your elaboration on the results that we are developing within Circles of Life and also the thoughts behind it. We already have some questions in the Q&A, so you can already check some of the questions in between. But thank you for presenting so clearly our objectives and the aimed results. I would like to give the floor to Matthias. So first we had setting the scene on circularity and sustainability in the maritime sector. Martin explained the contribution of Circles of Life to contribute to enhancing circularity and sustainability. And now we are getting into how do we translate our results into practice and in the industry itself. So I would like to give the floor to Matthias. Thank you and good luck.
Thank you very much, Roseanne, and to all the listeners, good afternoon, good morning, good night, wherever you are located. So since I'm working for a research center that is owned by a trade association, it is our mission to regularly being interested in checking whether and how research and development results can be applied by the industry. And so we do here in the Circles of Life project. So my colleagues and I are particularly addressing this question with respect to the CEPI concept. So the means to this end is to perform case studies and to develop a best practice guide. So what does it mean? During the next minutes, I'm going to start by explaining what is the scope of these case studies and what is the approach we are going to apply. And thirdly, as an example, we will have the opportunity to dive a little bit deeper into one of the case studies. That is the one which is coordinated by the Damen Group. And finally, I will conclude by explaining how we deal with best practice examples, which we identified during the Circles of Life project. So let's start. You have seen this picture before with the scope of the case studies. So the blue boxes here are representing all the life cycle phases of a ship except the ship operation. Please have a look at the highlighted parts now. Those are the 3 life cycle phases which we selected for the case studies. And the green boxes, which appear now, they are representing the 4 case studies which we are performing. You can also read the addressed processes and the shipyards which are leading each of the case study. So in each case study, we concentrate on processes which are prone for high emissions. So we used our educated guess. Before taking any measurements, we had a certain idea of which processes are usually those which come with high emissions and where do we see potential for improving and where we can showcase how the CEPI concept works. Then let's talk about the approach. So the first of 6 steps is to understand better how the process which we selected for the case study actually works. So the shipyards and the involved suppliers are breaking down the processes into sub-processes. And while doing this, they answer questions such as what kind of emissions are there, when do they occur, and where. And finally, it is also determined whether data about the as-is emissions are already available, so whether we can make use of historical data, or whether and how the data can be obtained by measurements. The second step is to get a better understanding about options, which means technologies which can help reducing the emissions. So the owners of the processes and the owners of suitable solutions come together and analyze the mode of action. So how would innovative technologies with less emissions help reducing the emissions? How effective could they be? And do we expect any potential interactions with other processes when implement new technologies? So as an example, you can take laser welding. So if you introduce laser welding as an alternative technology for joining, you do not only need to look at the emissions which occur during the joining process itself, but also at side effects. So laser welding usually comes with higher accuracy. Therefore, you need less rework after the joining. Therefore, you have less rework or less emissions during rework. This is also contributing to the overall emission balance. Then, third step, choosing the assessment method. So different emission estimation techniques will be selected based on the specific processes and emissions. Methods such as direct measurement, mass balance, engineering calculations, and acknowledged emission factors will be applied. As a fourth step, the assessment will be performed. So we will use the chosen assessment methods, will obtain emission figures as well for the as-is situation, but also for the scenario for the situation after introducing improved technologies. And the results will be input values for calculating the CEPI values using the tools, the software tools provided by CirclesOfLife. And the last two steps are related to collecting feedback and processing the results of the exercise. So first, collecting feedback from those who performed the case study will be used within the project consortium in order to understand the usability of the CEPI concept and the related tools, and to apply measures in order to further improve the solutions. And this, the last step is to work on the inventory and best practice guide. So the know-how on low emission shipyard processes will be collected from the case studies performers and will be compiled into an inventory and best practice guide. So now let's look into the case study, which is led by the Dahmen Group. And as already indicated, this case study is dealing with repair and maintenance. So in step number 1, as you remember, we call it understanding the as-is process. We make use of a commonly agreed standard for process modeling, the so-called generic shipyard model, which Martin already mentioned. So on this picture, we see an overview of the entire generic shipyard model. And on 3 different hierarchy levels, all the possible processes in a ship's life cycle are included. However, in our case study, we are only interested in maintenance and repair processes. So we can concentrate on those processes under this magnifying glass. So the individual shipyards, for instance, Dahmen, when doing this case study, can utilize the generic shipyard model and select those processes which are applicable to them. And then we have to be aware that this is still a generic process. It does not reflect all the specific ways the process has been implemented at Damen. This will needs to be considered in the next step when going to the next level. And because if we want to assess a specific shipyard's eco footprint, we need to consider how the process is implemented. And this involves modeling of the sub-processes and allocating the technologies used in those sub-processes. And this happens on this next level, which is represented here. Most probably you cannot read it, but let's have a quick look. What you see is a model of a painting process. And at this level, we are doing business process modeling in order to document the various information, for instance, sequence of sub-processes, the regulations which are applicable when doing the process, and the technologies applied. On the bottom, you see a number of processes in parallel, or sub-processes in parallel. Those are processes which can be used alternatively. So you have different options how you can perform the processes by using different technologies. I will come back to this on one of the next slides. On this level of modeling the sub-processes, we'll also define the data points where we allocate the emissions associated with the processes. These emission values are needed for later processing them in order to calculate the overall CP value of the shipyard. And now I will continue coming back to the technologies and comparing them against each others. So, oops, that was too quick. So the second and third step is what we also call technology scouting. So you might remember that surface treatment was identified as an emission hotspot in repair and maintenance. And among others, the technologies which are being compared in terms of emissions, working conditions, versatility, and technical limitations. So those are the aspects which can be used. So the upper picture shows you some examples of conventional technologies which are currently used at the shipyard, which is investigated in the case study. So you can imagine that these technologies are not totally free of emissions. The working conditions are safe. However, the jobs are not the most attractive ones, if you can say so. This leaves room for improvement. Below, you can now see some of the results we obtained from the technology scouting process. So technologies we identified, or Damen has identified as candidates for improving the situation. So they are both based on robot technology, and they both offer advantages in terms of lower emissions. So the robot on the right is equipped with water jet technology and a closed water circuit, which involves filtering and cleaning of the water. And in addition, thanks to an interchangeable head, the equipment is also versatile, which allows to not only perform one of the sub-processes, but applying the technology for, in this case, paint removal and application of paint. And the robot on the left does not require docking of the ship, which can also be an advantage. Even more advantages for both of the two robots can be seen on the economic side. Working with them is quite efficient. However, there are also some disadvantages which have been identified. So these two robots cannot be used for any kind of surfaces in terms of how the surface is shaped, meaning they are best suitable for even surfaces, but not for curved ones. So having said that, I will talk about steps 4 and 5. Those are currently still work in progress at the participating project partners. So after having done the technology scouting, you need to think how the results will translate into the CP, or how they will be translated into the CP. So on the left-hand side of this picture, you see the concept of Circles of Life, providing a platform of Circles of Life tools, which we are going to provide. All these tools, for instance, the generic shipyard model, are generic, so they do not representing specific shipyards. The customization takes place in the second column, so there we use the tools in order to represent individual entities. And for specific shipyards, a digital model is created based on the generic shipyard model. And then, last column, during the course of the case studies, we are collecting data which allow us to compare the as-is processes where the current technologies are applied with the situation after a potential introduction of alternative technologies, so the to-be scenario, let's say. And these data are obtained by different means, like performing measurement campaigns or taking into account historic data. And all this data is entered into the Circles of Life platform for further aggregation, processing, and calculation of the CP values. And finally, once we have these calculated CP values, they can be used or they can be attributed to the shipyards as well through the Ship Lifecycle Passport, SLP. The score will also be assigned to the ships built, repaired, or scrapped at the shipyards. So those were, oh no, it's not the end. I forgot the sixth step. How will the outcomes be represented? So this leads us to the sixth step, which we call inventory and best practice guide. So the accumulated knowledge will end up in a best practice guide, which we are compiling during the project. One part of the best practice guide might be a book, like the AI representation given here. And this book can give advice on how to implement the Circles of Life solution platform on a shipyard. But we want to provide more than that. So other parts of the best practice guide will come maybe with different types of media, probably as a software that allows decision makers to compare technologies using specific scorecards, which we plan to offer. So not only environmental, but also economic, technical, and social aspects can be assessed before taking action. I want to underline that while the CEPI method, which is the calculation of the environmental performance, will be standardized, on the other hand, the users will be free how to assess the other aspects and to define their own weighting factors before taking a decision. So all this helps searching for solutions which in the best case provide a what we call win-win-win-win situation, meaning excellent performance in all criteria, as mentioned, environmental, economic, technical, and social aspects. So this concludes my presentation. As said before, please make use of the question session in the Teams webinar. And thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Matthias. Thank you, Matthias, for explaining how we are going to translate the results towards the practice with the best practice guide, but also with the case studies. I think it's also very interesting how we focus within Circles of Life in this win-win situation, not only focus on the environmental side, but also on the technical, but also the economic side and the social side of it. So thank you for elaborating on this. And I would like to ask you, take your time to think about questions. We have a very short break, so 3:05, we will start again with the Q&A session. So have a coffee, for example, or have some water, and then you can also share your questions, of course, in the Q&A box. If you do not have access to the Q&A box, we just had a question, please feel free to share it in the chat, and we will share it in the Q&A box. And we are looking forward to see you again in 7 minutes, I think. Thank you. And thank you also for these presentations up until this moment. Thank you. It's already 3:05, so I think everyone is getting back into the room. I see Benedetta has put on her camera. Good to have you here again. Just as a reminder, you also have the time now to fill in Q&A, to share questions with us in the Q&A box. We already saw some ranking with the thumbs up going in, so I would like to start with the Q&A session in 1 minute. So if you have any questions left, please share also in the Q&A box. Okay, 1 minute also has passed. So we would like to begin with the, okay, I see Mike Mewis shares that the Q&A box gives an error. Please feel free to share your question in the chat box. We will check the chat box with your question. Thank you. I would like to start with the first question. The question will got 9 thumbs up. I will check. And now even 10. So it's a question regarding the SAPI, the Shipyard Environmental Performance Index. Is it equal to double materiality analysis under CSRD reporting? If so, has anything been added to the required scope? It's a question from Henning Graman.
Should I try to make a start on the answer?
Yes, thank you, Jorinus. You can take the floor.
The short answer is no, it's not the same, because a double materiality assessment needs to be done by each specific company. But the topics that are listed both by, for example, Green and in SAPI, those are the topics that we consider relevant for a shipyard or a related company to report on in your CSRD report. So most likely the topics that are in SAPI and also in Green Marine are topics that you would also encounter in your double materiality assessment. And they're more or less compatible, so there's not additional scope added.
Thank you, Jorinus, for answering. I think it's quite clear. Just checking also with the other speakers. Something to add, perhaps, Martin?
Yes, so it's not replacing the DMA, but it's making it more objective. So we try to make sure for the topics that are material to the art that objective measurements are used for reporting. So that's what I would like to add there.
Yes, thank you. That's a good contribution. I hope the question has been answered. If you still have some questions left out because of this answer, please also feel free to share in the chat. Then I would like to go to the next question, and that's the following. What is the regulatory body which checks or assesses the actual SCMP and SAPI? Can I give the floor back to you, Martin?
Yes, you can. That's a very good question, which we're also, of course, investigating within the project. As the passports are created, especially the ship passport, when the ship is delivered to the ship owner, it's handed over to when the ship is delivered to the ship owner, the passport is also handed over to the ship owner. So then he's responsible to maintain it. One stakeholder of the life cycle we're looking into could be the regulatory bodies, like a class society, who could maintain it. What we're still, of course, investigating what is the best solution for that. Another one could be the same system like is now used for IHM, for maintaining an IHM. So a regulatory body like a class society could be a good candidate because they are also involved in checking, for example, a repair to a ship. And also at the end of life, they're involved in the ready for recycling certificate. So that's one of the stakeholders we're thinking on. But of course, with having BV also in our project, we will going to verify this approach.
Thank you for addressing the question, Martin. Then the following question. It's from Renaud Gaudel. I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Also 8 likes. Is the EU regulation going to impose the CEPI, but also the SCMP in the future? Or will it be on the goodwill of shipyards, designers only, which involves extra costs and timing and might not be used without enforcing? Thank you. I already see Antedea with a raised hand. Would you like to address the question?
Yeah, I can start,
Thank you.
and of course, the member of the Circle of Life could complete. At this stage, this is not a mandatory project. Circle of Life is on a goodwill, and Green Marine is also on a goodwill. It's a voluntary basis. Nevertheless, we'll be issuing some recommendation to legislator at the fall of this year, and they could be inspired by our initiative and its relevance. So today we can say there is no legislation, no binding aspect. Nevertheless, this work is kind of lab also that could, I would say, inspire the legislator.
Thank you, Antedea, for answering the question. Martin, do you have an addition? I also see Matthias. I will come back to you.
Well, I think what is good to take in mind, we have 2 passport envisioned, so 1 passport for the materials and the components and 1 for the ship. As there is not yet a mandatory delegated act for ships as such, some of the components and materials that go into a vessel are already part of upcoming delegated act. So if you think of the steel or maybe a dual-use component that's also used in the construction sector, that are already up for mandatory digital product passport, for example. So before a ship passport is there, it might already be the case that there's already mandatory for the components of the ship. So there's a little bit of push and pull factor. In general, under ESPR, all products placed on the European market need to provide a DPP, a digital product passport, with information and performance requirements. So it will come eventually, and there are also, of course, business values in supplying this information.
Thank you, Martin. Matthias, have you something to add?
Yeah, I wanted to add, when we applied as a consortium for the Circles of Life project, we did that because there was a call for proposals by the European Commission, exactly asking for developing a concept for a CEPI and for a digital product passport for ships. So the European Commission had reasons for doing so. And I guess the reason is more towards strongly encouraging, at least, the stakeholders to implement concepts like that after they have been made available, rather than just asking stakeholders to do this on a goodwill basis.
Thank you, Matthias, and also Martin and Antedea for answering this question. I hope the question has been answered in this way. You see different perspectives, but also that you see Circles of Life is in that sense also a European project. So they are also eager to know what are the challenges and what is needed for the maritime industry if you develop such a passport. So thank you for answering. I would like to go to the next question, and it's also from Renaud Gaudel. A really good question, also 7 likes. So the question is as follows. Who is responsible for the software maintenance and update once the project is over? And will it be made for designers, shipyards, or owners, or even for EU certification members? Thank you. So it's a bit twofold the question, of course, about the software maintenance itself, but also for who will be available, who will be the target audience or the users of the software tool. I think I can perhaps give the word to Jorinus. Yes.
In case of doubt. Now, the main project result is a blueprint or an explanation how you apply CEPI and a passport. So that's not software. That is something that you can translate to your own company by implementing that best practice guide. To demonstrate that, especially CEPI also works for a shipyard, there is software being developed by one of the partners. And that is more to demonstrate that CEPI will work rather than that is commercial software. But probably you can reach out to the partner in the project if you want to use it after the project. But the main result is sort of the step-by-step guide how to apply SAPI and how to do the product passports. And that will also be adopted by Green Marine Europe after the project. And also Green Marine Europe will not become a software developer. So.
Yes, thank you, Jorinus, for explaining the question. Just to check, are there any additions to the answer? I think it's all clear. If something is not clear in the audience, please share also via the chat. The next question is from Michael Hoepler. Where do you see the advantages and disadvantages of a SAPI for the industry itself? And perhaps you can give at least one disadvantage and one advantage, because we have still some questions. I'm looking at you, Martin. You cannot see it, of course, via my camera, but would you like to take the floor?
Yeah, I'm trying to hide. No. The advantage is that we make the topics that are applicable to corporate yard reporting more objective, which supports hotspot analysis, investment planning, and attracting new business to greener yards, because you have that label. One of the disadvantages, of course, that it takes effort and resource to measure, report, and maintain the data. These are basically one advantage and one disadvantage. I don't know if somebody else has to add to that.
Perhaps Matthias? I see you're muting yourself.
Yeah, so thank you. You read my mind. Of course, it is an advantage that you get yourself into a position to assess yourself and to get to know where exactly you are on the scale of greenness. And then once you are there, of course, you can use this as a showcase or as for advertisement. You can show it to your customers, to the customers of the customers, and this is, of course, an asset, I would think.
Yes, thank you, Matthias, also for sharing the advantage as an extra for your customers itself, to show what your how you use the SAPI tool and also what your outcome is. I would like to go to the next question, and that's also a question from Kudari. Will CirclesOfLife deliver software tools for creating a CSRD report? I'm looking at the speakers. I can also, but I see Jorinus already coming in. Yes, thank you.
It's a bit similar to my previous answer. It will not make software and it will not be CSRD reporting, but by following the SAPI framework or the way of working, it will be CSRD friendly. So you'll be collecting or calculating or assessing information that is also relevant for your CSRD report. So it's not the same, but it will be CSRD friendly. So at least part of the information gap is filled by using SAPI.
Thank you, Jorinus. I think that's very clear and straightforward. Just to check, Martin, do you have an addition? I saw a raised hand.
No. It's exactly like that. The output of SAPI could be used for your CSRD reporting, but it does not generate your CSRD report. But what you can do, of course, with your assessment of your operation, if you know the hotspots, you can use that hotspot analysis for your improvement planning. So where am I going to invest and how I'm going to translate that into the narrative part of your CSRD report.
Thank you. Thank you for answering the question. I would like to go to the last question. Of course, there are multiple questions still in the Q&A box. We will keep them in mind also for a following webinar, for example. But I would like to finish with one question before you're going into the roundup. The last question, also from Michael Hubler, regarding the ongoing developments with product passports, such as the battery passport. Are you taking these into account? If so, how do you plan to interconnect with them? And I think I can give the floor to Martin, because we had a discussion about the battery passports also within CirclesOfLife together. Would you like to answer the question?
Yeah, of course. That's a very good question. We did a benchmarking on all the initiatives and projects that are going on there, because we, of course, don't want to reinvent something. So yes, in short, we are taking this into account. We're even reaching out to these projects to learn from them and to see where is the overlap. And it's on two levels, because we have also, of course, a passport on component level. And as a shipbuilder, we also integrate battery passport. So from that perspective, but also to see how we can see where there's a common ground on the indicators, so that we make sure that we don't invent new indicators that don't align with other passport initiatives. So the battery passport is one project example, also the Surpass project, but many other projects on passport and supplying relevant sustainability and circularity information. We are trying to either reach out and to get information exchange, or to test what they think of our development. So to get them involved in our stakeholder program.
Yes, thank you, Martin. Thank you for answering the question. I hope we have clarified some of the questions and some of the doubts regarding the ongoing developments. If you have any questions left and you think after the webinar, or you think in this evening or tomorrow morning, you think I have a very urgent question, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. We also share our contact details, but you can also reach out to us individually. But please take part also of this discussion, because this already helps us a lot. What you think about, for example, who will be the regulatory body, who will assess the passport or the CEPI itself? Those are very good questions. So thank you for sharing. Then I would like to continue with the roundup itself of the webinar. We have only 10 minutes left. So we have been going through this informative webinar, and we started off with Antedea and Benedetta setting the scene on circularity and sustainability in the maritime chain, where also Antedea explained how they, as Green Marine Europe, are an important stakeholder within Circles of Life. And also after the project, if we have finalized our results, they will incorporate it in their own certification scheme. Then the second one was Martin, our speaker from Damen. He explained to us the results of Circles of Life on what we are working on and what is the status and our ideas around it. So also very nice that we see that there were interesting questions coming in, so that I think hopefully for some of them it was also clear what we were presenting, and that you could also ask critical and in-depth questions. So also thank you for the stakeholders in the room. Then the third, that was Matthias. Matthias explained to us how we as Circles of Life and the partners within Circles of Life, we are working on how to translate the results towards the maritime industry. He addressed the case studies, but he also addressed the best practice guide with the scoring card, and how we can make this win-win equation between environmental factors, but also social, economical, and technical. Then the next slide is also for you as a stakeholder who is still in this room. How can you be involved within Circles of Life? So also at the end of 2025, but also in 2026, we will organize feedback sessions and also training sessions. You are already following the first webinar itself. We will organize dedicated feedback sessions for the CEPI itself, so the development of CEPI, but we also will organize feedback sessions specifically for the passports. Then we also will develop and also give in-depth training sessions in 2026 on mastering the CEPI. How can I apply CEPI to my own shipyard activities, or even for other stakeholders, customers who would like to see what you can do with such a CEPI? Then we also would like to provide sessions on the passports, so the SCMP and the SLP, the different passports which are developed within Circles of Life. So we have these two different training sessions we are going to organize also in 2026, more in depth and also based on our first published results. And then it's also the question for you. What is in it for you as a maritime stakeholder to follow us, but also to join these feedback sessions and the training sessions itself? We would like to invite you also to become with us the front runner. We already received a question on who's going to be the regulatory body who's going to assess, for example, these type of results. We know that some passport developments can become more obligatory on the EU level side. So we also as a maritime sector would already like to interchange with policy officers on the EU level. What are the advantages, what are the disadvantages, and what are specifically challenges for the maritime sector? So also join us in those discussions. You can also follow the free training. If you follow us, if you see a webinar popping up, for example, on your LinkedIn or in your email, you have the opportunity to join and to learn, just like today. And the third one is also the networking opportunities. So this is a webinar. We are mainly sharing information, but we also will have form of other different events. During the feedback sessions, we also have more opportunities to connect with each other and also share information between the different stakeholders. So that's also an opportunity for you as a stakeholder to follow Circles of Life. Then I would like to show you a bit of the timeline and also the next steps. So we started in January 2024. And first we started thinking about this methodology of the SAPI development. What kind of KPIs should be included in a SAPI if we think about the maritime industry? And a little bit afterwards, we also start with the specification of the ship lifecycle passport and also the ship circular material passport. What kind of regulations do we need to follow? What kind of guidelines do we need to incorporate for the maritime industry? Then in the beginning of January 2025, we started to develop also the software tool for the SAPI itself. What kind of dashboard is attractive also for the shipyards and also for the stakeholders who have a connection with the shipyards itself? And we also start outlining the case studies. So how are we going to make this connection with the practice itself, which is also what Matthias addressed. And now we are here. So we are now in the midst of 2025, and we have our first webinar on Circles of Life. If you go into the future, we think at the end of January 2026, we have planned to publish our first results in forms of deliverables. We will also update you on this site. And if you think about feedback sessions, training sessions, but also events you can join as a stakeholder, this is the following overview. First, I would like to address that in September, the 24th of September, we have our Green Shipping Industry Day in Brussels. This is the mid-conference of Circles of Life, which we also jointly organize with Eco Shipyard, another European project, and with Green Marine Europe. Please feel free, we also send you afterwards, after this webinar, we will share with you a QR code that you can also join us. Join us during the Green Shipping Industry Day in Brussels, where we have discussions on the first results. Then, if we look into the future, in 2026, then the feedback sessions, but also the follow-up training sessions will be organized. And you will also be invited to join, to share your opinion, but also from your perspective, what are your challenges, and what would you like to see in these type of results? What would be your benefits? You have the opportunity to share with us based on our first results. And then already at the end of 2026, our Circles of Life project will be finalized. But that's not the end, because what's next? And it already came forward multiple times, and Antadia is also with us in the room. Green Marine Europe, they will also incorporate the results in the Green Marine Europe certification scheme. So the mission of making the maritime industry more sustainable and circular will also be continued, also within this organization. And we, as all the different partners, will stay connected to also accompany this mission. As you saw on the timeline, we have the date set for the mid-conference, but there are no date sets yet in 2026, but we will work on this also over summer. So if you would like to stay updated, please also scan this QR code. We will also share it after the webinar so that you can fill in the contact form. But you can also reach out to us via email and also, of course, follow us on LinkedIn so that you have the opportunity to stay updated. Then I would like to stop sharing your screen so I can some of the speakers again in this room. We have only 1 minute left. So I would also like to thank the speakers for their timing. But first of all, I would really like to thank the stakeholders who have taken the time to join this session and also ask very good critical questions. Thank you all for joining. Thank you all for being here. And thank you all for listening to us. I would like to wish you a very good day. And also hopefully we will stay connected in the future. And we would like to see you in the future trainings and also feedback sessions. So thank you all. Also thank you speakers. It was great to have you here also as partners. So I will close the meeting at this stage. Thank you all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.